you think about, like, you introduced me as a corporate lawyer. There's so much perceived romance. That sounds so much more impressive than it actually is when you're keeping track of every 6 minutes of every professional hour.
Yeah.
Same thing as a founder, right? The perceived romance of being a founder, and you two know this. There's very little romantic about being a founder. When I think about the actual day-to-day of being a corporate lawyer, especially a junior associate at a big, huge firm in New York City, it was sitting in windowless conference rooms in cities that I couldn't even remember the names of, going through bankers' boxes of documents. And I remember very early on in my career, I was pretty dispirited with it, and I don't have a great attention span to begin with. And I got just really early great advice from a senior person in the firm who said, listen, Andrew, you can take this work you're doing and think about it in a couple of different ways. You can sit there and bemoan the fact that you're in a nameless city and you're sitting in a windowless conference room looking through documents and woe is me. Why did I go to Georgetown Law School to do this? On the other hand, you can remind yourself that there's nobody on this deal that's closer to the details than you are.
Yeah.
We are going to rely on you throughout this large, sophisticated transaction. You may think of us as doing the more interesting work and coming in at the 11th hour and making sure the closing goes well and then having that celebratory dinner together. But everything is premised on the small details that you are going to uncover. One, two, think about if you open your mind a little bit and stop, complaining about your circumstance and think about it as an opportunity. You're being given the opportunity to learn so much about so many different things that you otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn about.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-hosts DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On today's episode of Limitless Minds, we have special guest Andrew Goldner. He's the co-founder of GrowthX, a venture capital firm focused on supporting startups through market development and capital investment. He also co-founded GrowthX Academy, which helps individuals and companies develop go-to-market skills. Before GrowthX, Goldner had a diverse career spanning technology, law, entrepreneurship, VC. He's worked with leadership roles at Thomson Reuters, Bright Talk, as well as serving as legal counsel for companies like DoubleClick and Salesforce. His experience extends internationally, having managed businesses both in the U.S. and Asia. Ultimately, he's a beast, is what I'm trying to say. Goldner is, he's known for his passion for building relationships and seeking congruity in business, emphasizing the importance of human connections and deal making, as well as being involved as a mentor in various institutions, including the Kauffman Fellows Program and the Alchemist Accelerator. I'm really looking forward to the audience getting a chance to hear from him. A little different take than some of our folks from coaching to athletics, but this is truly kind of the mindset of a corporate athlete. Let's go. All right, folks, we're here on another Limitless Minds episode. I'm really excited to introduce our audience to Andrew Goldner. We became fast friends at an evening in Indianapolis at a really cool dinner we were doing. I think as many people know, we do these performance and mindset dinners across the nation, getting together some of the top minds in venture and entrepreneurship and technology and et cetera. And Andrew happened to be in the room that night, sitting to my right, and just offered a ton of gems and wisdom and imparted on me. And there's so much more for me to learn from Andrew, but I wanted to share some of that with the audience and just for everybody knows. I mean, Andrew is a tech veteran with over 2 decades of experience advising, founding, and running startups globally. He's done work in New York and Hong Kong and Palo Alto. He currently lives and resides in Nashville, as that's kind of that place is taken over and is kind of a place of its own. It's really exciting, but he's led companies across the board from DoubleClick to Reuters and now at GrowthX. And so he's just got an excellent passion and knowledge for, what it takes to certainly be successful in business and especially in the startup space, but also just in general relative to peak performance. And he's got his own passions, particularly, I think we talked about long distance running. I want to tap into that a little bit. So we're just excited to have you on, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time.
Harry, you mentioned all those cities, man. You didn't mention Cleveland. That's, I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't mention Cleveland. Yeah, Hong Kong, Palo Alto.
Purposely left it out.
I left it out because I wanted to give you guys that stage to talk about, the believe land, Cleveland.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
for sure. Well, let me just say, as I always like to start these things with, expressing my gratitude, and I mean it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I loved our time together at that dinner. And I really have been excited about this conversation since you proposed it. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you both.
It's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're
Welcome
excited. We're excited. Yeah, yeah. So listen, I'd love to just a little bit explore kind of really just your journey. Obviously, it's been a really impressive one, right? And I think that what people may not know is that you began in the industry as an attorney, as a tech lawyer. Is that right?
That's true. My professional career started then. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
My working career, we ain't going to go back this far, but my working career started in Cleveland, delivering the plain dealer door to door. Or excuse me, I wasn't delivering the plain dealer. I was delivering the Cleveland Press. That does not exist anymore. DJ may know the Cleveland Press.
That's before. That's you know what? That might even be before. Like
we don't have to go back that far. But I have been working my whole life. I mean, there's a work ethic there that I've been working literally since I was about 9 years old. But yeah, my professional career started. I was frankly just very fortunate, luck of timing and the luck of circumstance. I went into law school when the internet was first commercializing. And it just happened to separate me from so many others that were in my situation, in that I actually knew how the internet worked. And it's another Cleveland story. Quickly, when growing up in Cleveland, out of the basement of our home, my older brother Lewis was literally a part of helping to run the earliest version of the internet. He was running it out of our basement in 1986. What was called, if you all remember, I'm going to date you, but it was called a bulletin board. And Lewis had an IBM PC that he convinced my dad to buy, and a Hayes 5700 baud modem. And all I knew in middle school is I had to share my phone line if I wanted to talk to my girlfriend with my parents, but Lewis got his own phone line, and that was because of the modem. And so when I came out of law school, and even during law school, I didn't know anything about being a corporate lawyer, but I knew how the internet worked. And so I lucked into that.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's
really
awesome.
Cool.
That's cool. What's Lewis doing now?
Yeah, Lewis is now an executive with a big data company that's doing extremely well. But he was very, very early. He went to the University of Cincinnati like I did, and like so many folks, he went into Procter & Gamble. And Lewis was very early in helping them start and grow their digital marketing group. So the notion of really even just what digital marketing, that was a term that didn't even really have a definition back when Lewis was doing it. So he was out west in internet companies. He's been doing a bunch of different things.
So Lewis was then your first kind of like that's really what got you into tech in terms of that excitement.
It really is. Yeah, it honestly is. I mean, Lewis and I haven't talked a ton about it. I've mentioned it before, and I always bring it up on podcasts, and I always shout out and give love to my older brother. And he absolutely does get the credit for this, because I mean, the other part of the story is, just quickly, when I was a first year associate, now having graduated law school and chosen to move to New York City, I was a first year associate, and literally an all firm email went out asking, does anybody know what a digital marketing agreement is? And of course, like a lot of us, I had no idea what it is, but I immediately shot my hand up and hit reply and said, I do. And when the partner responded and said, listen, come to my office, I said, I'll be there in a minute. I picked up the phone. I called my brother Lewis. I said, what is a digital marketing agreement in 30 seconds? And can you send me some examples? And he did.
That was his Chat GPT, Harry. Back in the that was his version.
Chat Louis BG.
That's right. That's amazing. Well, I mean, like, you've had all these kind of like really dope like stops and impacted some of these companies. I mean, like, you've been involved in some major company acquisitions, right? Double click to Google, for example, and I know there's others. Tell us a little bit about those experiences and how they've kind of really shaped your approach towards business, like leadership and problem solving, right? Because because I know that's
Yeah,
all a part
I
of that,
appreciate
those
that.
journeys.
I
Yeah.
mean, like I think about how I've been blessed throughout my life, where people that are so much more capable than I am have seen something in me that they wanted to just help and improve, and were willing to invest some of their experience and wisdom in me. And I really have been blessed throughout my life with that. And I think back to my early days as a lawyer, um, you know, sitting in windowless conference rooms, diligencing documents. I mean, you think about, like, you introduced me as a corporate lawyer. There's so much perceived romance. That sounds so much more impressive than it actually is when you're keeping track of every 6 minutes of every professional hour.
Yeah.
Same thing as a founder, right? The perceived romance of being a founder, and you two know this. There's very little romantic about being a founder. When I think about the actual day-to-day of being a corporate lawyer, especially a junior associate at a big, huge firm in New York City, it was sitting in windowless conference rooms in cities that I couldn't even remember the names of, going through bankers' boxes of documents. And I remember very early on in my career, I was pretty dispirited with it, and I don't have a great attention span to begin with. And I got just really early great advice from a senior person in the firm who said, "Listen, Andrew, you can take this work you're doing and think about it in a couple of different ways. You can sit there and bemoan the fact that you're in a nameless city and you're sitting in a windowless conference room looking through documents, and woe is me. Why did I go to Georgetown Law School to do this?" On the other hand, you can remind yourself that there's nobody on this deal that's closer to the details than you are.
Yeah.
We are going to rely on you throughout this large, sophisticated transaction. You may think of us as doing the more interesting work and coming in at the 11th hour and making sure the closing goes well, and then having that celebratory dinner together. But everything is premised on the small details that you are going to uncover. One, two, think about, if you open your mind a little bit and stop complaining about your circumstance and think about it as an opportunity. You're being given the opportunity to learn so much about so many different things that you otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn about. And I got to tell you, it really has made all the difference, starting from them, to kind of think about it with that kind of attitude. I will tell you too that, and this is advice I always give folks, especially younger folks, if I have the opportunity. Even at the end of the day, when I knew that I was, really in love with the subject matter of technology, and I had a chance at a very large law firm in New York City to focus on doing deals only in that subject matter space. At the end of the day, what was also really important is, discovering what it is that I didn't like about my current professional career. Not to complain about it, right? Not to whine about it, but to think about, okay, what do I want to work myself towards in the future? And how do I be intentional about it? One of the things that I learned very quickly about myself, and wouldn't have otherwise as being a law firm lawyer, is I didn't like any business that was premised solely on the amount of time I spent on something, not the amount of value that I added. So that was something I had to think about, right? And what does that mean for me as a business? The other thing was, I wanted at every chance I could get to be as close to revenue. And I got to tell you, as a junior attorney at a large law firm, partners don't want you having anything to do with that. Like, you are the only profit center in the business. Just be in your office and bill hours.
Yeah.
But like, I wanted to spend time developing the reputation of this new practice group that focused on technology. I wanted to speak at conferences. I wanted to write articles. I wanted to write client memos. I wanted to develop new business. I wanted to be out there pitching companies and trying to bring them in as new clients of the firm. And so again, just, thinking intentionally about what are the characteristics, as I like to say, the adjectives of what you're doing that you enjoy and don't enjoy, as a means to put together kind of your narrative as you pursue your professional arc.
And you brought up the word perspective. You brought up the word value. I think about you, and I'm imagining you delivering papers as a 10-year-old, 9-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
Around that time.
Yeah.
And you go from that, and which is more transactional by nature, right, to like having this switch flipped, where it's like, I don't want to be transactional. I don't want to be hourly. I want to be somebody that brings value. Was that a switch that was flipped, or is this something that, just kind of awakened during that time? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's a really wonderful observation, and thank you for the question. It certainly wasn't in any way on the surface obvious to me until, probably the last 10 years, frankly. It took me that long to kind of gain the wisdom. But yeah, looking back, as more of a quote seasoned professional, otherwise known as older, yeah, I mean, my authentic alignment towards relationships and not transactions, being relational versus transactional, and as you want to kind of talk more about what I've done, and we get up to GrowthX, it's all absolutely that common theme is a journey that from one perspective on LinkedIn might look highly nonlinear, but there is a pattern that you astutely kind of just nailed right there. And part of it is, always being drawn to a relational opportunity versus a transactional one.
Yeah, I love that. We often talk about it at Limitless Minds. It's not about transactions, it's about transformation. And I feel that with you, just getting to know you today. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned GrowthX, right? I mean, this is where we are today. So like now we're in real time. You founded GrowthX, supporting B2B startups, right? Like ours, essentially, right? I'd love to hear more about that work and essentially like what is growth? Well, first of all, what does GrowthX do? Let's share that with the group, and then really like how has this past that you had informed that mission statement, and ultimately the kind of what the really kind of like what the objective is, and what the big vision is there.
Absolutely. I co-founded GrowthX. I want to make sure I give props to my co-founders. 4 of us came together in 2015 in San Francisco to form GrowthX. 2 of those people, my partner Max and I, exited the business several years ago. Just ended up not being a good long-term fit, but those are certainly co-founders. But Max and I, my primary co-founder and the person I still love and do business with every day as a partner, really came together and formed GrowthX for, one primary reason, which is how can we use sales expertise to help founders with a solvable problem and avoid, going out of business for the wrong reasons, and do that as a means to discover investable opportunities. And importantly, to the point we were just making, use it to earn the right to invest in them. We feel that the verbs of venture have for too long been very selfish. You think about VCs talking about how I find deals and how I qualify deals and I will decide whether I want to invest in you. And we're trying to add a new verb to venture, which is earn. How do we earn the right to invest in people? And we do that by being ridiculously helpful in one way, and that's with, B2B sales. And so the earliest kind of big bang of GrowthX came from a noticing we had in Silicon Valley in 2015, which is still to a certain extent true today. And that is really a question. Why is it that in 2015, if you know how to build products and you start a company, they call you a founder? But if you know how to sell products and you start a company, they call you a non-technical founder.
Hey.
As we know, non-technical founder is not meant as a compliment. But even
right.
Back in 2015, we were already living in the age of applied technology. As Mark Andreessen had predicted, software had already started to eat the world. In fact, it was well underway. And yet, we continue to deify the developer at the expense of the salesperson. And we look at why is it that creating product, there's never been a better time in the history of the world to build innovative products. Why? Because it's never been cheaper to do it. It's never been easier to do it. And there's never been more people who know how to do it. But where's the Ruby on Rails of go-to-market? Where's the Heroku of biz dev? Where's the GitHub of sales? I mean, every college and university across all of the United States and globally have computer science degrees. I dare you to find 10% of them that even offer one single credit-bearing course on entrepreneurial selling.
Yeah.
The proliferation of the product development boot camps, I dare you to find a simple market development boot camp. There literally is no profession of sales, and yet that is the number one reason why founders are failing. It's not the product, it's sales and marketing. And so at the end of the day, this is the genesis of GrowthX, and it's squarely what we do today. We help B2B founders in rising tech cities with B2B sales challenges. And we do that in order to build a relationship and earn the right to invest in them. It's really quite simple.
That's good. That's great. When you're working with these founders and tech entrepreneurs, how important is it to have a written plan, and what advice would you give around that?
Well, when you say written plan, what do you mean by that?
Like a business plan, a go-to-market plan, just
Go-to-market
actually
plan,
actually writing it down,
Absolutely, 100%, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And it's a lesson that I was blessed to learn as a lawyer. So I'm spending 12, 13, 14 hours a day in a conference room negotiating a deal. And when the client and the investment banker go out to a fancy dinner, I get sent back to my office to memorialize the day's conversation. That's a form of mental fitness, because when you are forced to go from soft copy to hard copy, what I was able to come to a quick realization was where everybody else saw a period, I see a comma. They think they're thinking through things A to Z, but they're lucky to maybe think through A to M. I'm forced to think through it A to Z because I'm literally memorializing and writing it down. And for most of us humans, we're not able to do that, simply in our minds. We've got to write it down. We've got to be thoughtful about it. Listen, to your question, one of the early ways we referred to what we do was analog growth hacking. Because during the growth hacking phase, where you had, let's say, a Google Analytics dashboard, where for no money and a little bit of technology common sense, you drop a tag manager in and you're gathering all sorts of rich data points that get delivered to you in a fancy, good-looking, useful dashboard. And that's great if you're a B2C founder. But if you're a B2B founder talking to humans, there is no Google dashboard. But that same level of intentionality, recording important data points, organizing them in a way to compare, to draw inferences, to draw analysis from, to come to a conclusion that you have conviction to make a decision behind, which, as you know, is what it means to be a founder. We don't have that delivered to us on a silver platter if we're B2B founders, right? But it's nonetheless critical. And so I wouldn't take us backwards prior to the lean startup movement and say founders should be putting together these business plans. But I absolutely think we're cheating ourselves by being casual, and I would even see lazy with how we're going to market. Because again, just for you guys, think about the rigor, the intentionality, the structure, and the frameworks that you have followed when you are going to product. For most founders, compare that to when they're going to market. It's almost like 180 degrees of difference. And again, part of it is because we're not handed software development frameworks, market development frameworks. There are code repositories, but there are not sales repositories that we can rely on. And so we have to just start with Google Docs and Google Sheets and write it down and organize it and think about it and spot the patterns so we can make a better decision about it. That's good advice.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. By the way, I really like this philosophy that you guys have. Mantra. I don't know if it's a mission statement. You maybe tell me exactly how to categorize it, but that first we help, then we invest, together we rise, right? I love that. I love that phrasing. I love that phrasing. And
together we rise. Those three simple words are very important to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, I think there's the obvious thought of just like, hey, like just rising, all the rising tides, like all ships are lifted, right? But there's also this kind of like that word of rise that I think is important, because I feel like you guys have identified and emphasizing just helping founders in rising cities too, right? Maybe underserved from slash, the kind of these flyover states, like the middle of the country, for example. Tell us a little bit about that and how you identify those markets and why that's important to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, listen, at the end of the day, it's important to us because of, how we were raised by our mamas.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the sign of a good founder is someone who was raised right by their mama.
Hmm.
Right. And it's not to say that you can't find those people on the coasts. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
lived for many years in California. Of course, those people are there. We just have an opinion that the signal to noise ratio is something that we don't want to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about rising tech cities, we're not really talking about the economic development statistics. I mean, Steve Case has and continues to do an extremely important and extremely comprehensive job at identifying from an economic development statistic perspective the rise of the rest. When we
Mm-hmm.
talk about that and we say together we rise, we're rising tech city, we're not talking about economic development statistics. We're talking about founder characteristics.
Mm.
Talking about bottom-up business builders who bootstrap or lightly capitalize to break even. People who aren't attracted to the noise and the nonsense, who don't go for FOMO. People who understand that you have to balance growth and profitability, right? Our founders are well aware of where Silicon Valley is. They could pick up and move there anytime they wanted. They choose not to, and that's the first sign that we're interested. I mean, why leave your home, your friends, your family, your community, and most likely a relatively lower cost basis to
Mhm.
move to the most expensive rat race in America just to be close to your capitalist?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Like, how
Yeah.
many people in Silicon Valley, based on what they are building, need proximity to a jet propulsion laboratory?
Mm-hmm.
Not many.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten a lot of pressure for that over the course of, the 6-year period we've been around. I mean, like, I started this company. I was already living in Louisville, Kentucky. DJ was in Cleveland, and of course we have, 2 other founders as well. And one that we've lost, due to cancer. And then my brother who's, been in a few different cities since we started the company,
Yeah.
we constantly get challenged on, where we're at. And also, kind of just the makeup of the team, having started kind of in that COVID timeframe, is very, very hybrid and virtual across the country, and battling that both internally and externally. Like, what's the plan? Like, what's the long-term goal? Like, what's going to set us up for success? But what I found, as I've kind of, at least in Louisville, DJ, you know what I mean, and it's certainly in Ohio, as we've gotten tremendous kind of backing and opportunity in Ohio, but in that Kentucky, Ohio, this area, there's a lot of rich soil under our feet as far as talent, emerging business, venture, certainly angel family office, et cetera. And so, we've raised the majority of our capital in kind of 2 rounds, a seed and kind of a seed 2 in the Midwest, right?
Amen.
Like Midwest. And I think I'm really optimistic about, startups and the founder landscape in our area. And it's been
I am optimistic too. And I guess, the other thing that I think is worth talking about too is, and I'm about to say something that'll shocking for a venture capitalist, but who cares about venture capital?
Mm-hmm.
See, what we need to care about is, are you two and what you're doing investable? Period. Everything else is just a detail. When I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Why should I be wandering around reverse engineering and ignoring founders because they don't fit my asset class? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I know the facts. Ventures is exponentially important to developing and rising economies. The impact of a venture outcome is so much larger than a collection of smaller outcomes. It's important. I don't say who cares about venture because we shouldn't be deploying it anymore.
Mhm.
And I think as an investor, if what I care about is the management fee that I derive based on 2% times the amount of blind pool capital I've been willing and able to raise, then that's going to reverse engineer and create a set of incentives that, frankly, I think have gotten us into the mess that we're in now.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, what's the most important thing is, are the people doing it, and is what they're doing investable? And if the answer is yes, everything else is a detail. Venture, bank financing, venture debt, mezzanine, buyout, private equity, who cares? Is it investable, and are they investable? Let's just deal with that. And so I think that's the reason I bring it up, is there is this, again, fascination, just like with being a founder, with being a venture capitalist. There is this perceived romance about my asset class, when all I do is buy and sell money for a living. That's my job. That is the job of every venture investor. Is I buy money for my investors in the form of services, and I sell it to you guys in exchange for your equity. That's all I do for a living. My asset class is a big, fast asset class, and it has a set of non-obvious characteristics. But is it the only game in town? And what makes the most sense for a plot of land between San Francisco and San Jose, does that necessarily mean that that's the only and most important game in town for developing an economy and giving people economic mobility and a shot at bootstrapping their family from one place to another? And I just don't think the answer is yes. So I think it's important, and it's critically important part of what we're doing. But right now, it's the only story being talked about.
Yeah. No, it's very, very interesting take on that. And I love it, because I think a lot of founders get discouraged, based on it's always the grass is always greener, wherever you're at. And I think that's a really good take on, just really trying to, going back to what you said earlier, bring value. And once you figure out a way to bring value, it doesn't matter whether it comes from VC, angels, the resources will flow in if you bring the value. So that's really good.
I'm into that. And listen, we've had the pleasure and really the blessing to be present and helpful in over 60 different rising tech cities, primarily across North America. And the other pattern I would kind of share with people is, venture entrepreneurs and venture investors are primarily attracted to living and working and thriving in an area because of the lifestyle it affords. Well, who creates the lifestyle? Lifestyle entrepreneurs. So you can create a second-class dirty standard of the lifestyle business, just like you did the non-technical founder. You can try to make that a 4-letter dirty word, but if you want to have a lifestyle economy that attracts the venture, you better also support your lifestyle entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you think back, you mentioned I'm watching your brother again, like in his room on that separate modem, right? And you're probably looking at him like, what the heck are you doing in there?
Yeah.
Did you think at that point, technology would be like where it is today? And then
no, I wish I did. I mean, my head was so far up my ass.
Well, you're talking to your girlfriend, right? Like he's in there building technology. You're on the phone with your girlfriend.
I mean, honestly, I wish it was even that. I mean, no, the answer is just no. I mean, I sat in front of the computer in the basement, the green screen, and watched these conversations between strangers magically happening on the green screen, because that's the bulletin board. And I got in trouble because Lewis would come home and he would know at some point I kind of like went on the keyboard and just typed some crappy stuff. And he would blow up the bulletin board. And of course, Lewis would yell at me and I'd get in trouble. But like, no, I didn't. I kind of just took it in as what it was. But I will tell you, and again, I'm kind of a late flower, everything, even professionally, I've I'm the best I've ever been. And I bloomed, later in life professionally. I would say certainly the genesis of GrowthX and what Max and I have been able to build it into is in large part because we have been very astute at trying to, as the saying goes, I get an idea of where the puck is going, not where it is.
Right.
And I would probably draw that back to the lesson, again, that I was blessed to learn from what I consider to be the finest journalists in the world, the Reuters journalists, who helped me understand how to, to sift through what to see the so what and the what next.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the follow-up question on that, where do you see technology going?
Well, I mean, listen, the easy answer there is artificial intelligence. I mean, I think that AGI, has an extraordinary promise, but I also think it has an extraordinary and very real, non-zero chance of being existential for humans as well. I think it's important that we understand it and we harness it. I'm not one of the people suggesting that needs to be turned off. But I think you can't really talk about the future of technology without talking about, honestly, the impact that AGI is going to have. And we've only really just seen, an infinitesimal beginning of it. I mean, there are those that say that we don't even yet have AGI. There are those that say that currently whatever's out there could pass the Turing test traditionally, and therefore be general intelligence. But I do think it's going to have an extraordinary impact on every walk of life, and existentially, it's going to have an impact. Not necessarily has to be a negative ending for humans, but I think that we need to be aware of it and thoughtful about, how we coexist and remain highly relevant in a world where we're no longer the highest intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good insight. And I really want to get back to talking about the founders, right? And like, because I think we're going to have quite a bit of founders that are listening to this particular episode, and also kind of follow Limitless and some of our network. And so certainly with your kind of global background, you have a ton of you've seen a lot, if you will, right? As you mentioned, you're seasoned, Andrew.
That
I am too.
You're
Andrew.
seasoned.
Don't,
You know what I
don't
mean?
worry about
I'm not
it,
as
man.
seasoned as the two of you, but I'm becoming seasoned myself.
Thanks.
Okay?
You didn't need to say that.
Yeah,
I don't know why that needed to be said.
Yeah, right.
I'm just reiterating. No, but you've seen, but no, truly though, you've seen a lot of startups say, hey, they've seen a lot of success, or maybe, and it certainly probably wasn't this. It's probably a lot of that,
Yeah,
and
always.
you've also seen some unicorns, etc. But I'm really curious about the founders behind these, because you talked about kind of really what you're thinking about. Hey, who's building it, right? And what are they building, and investable, right? From the who perspective, I'd love to learn a little bit about some of the characteristics and some of the traits that you've seen that you can hang your hat on, as far as like,
Absolutely.
great founders are great founders, look like X, you know what I mean? Like, how would you package that?
Yeah. And I don't think I'm going to add anything that you haven't heard before. But I can tell you from a GrowthX perspective, there's number one thing that's the absolute most important thing that we look for to determine whether they're a fit for us. And that is, are you a learn-it-all?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't help and you don't really want to help a know-it-all.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons that we insist on helping a founder for 16 weeks before we'll even consider investing or turning them on to any of our other investors in our network is, again, transactionally. You all know what it's like to be on a first date. I mean, think about our lives. I mean, think about who we were on our first date versus who we are today.
Shoot. Hey,
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so like, what, like, again, like I try to kind of, even though sometimes I definitely, get into using the technology and venture speak, I try not to, but like, let's talk about the due diligence process. And this is answering your question, right? But like, what is the quote due diligence process at the pre-seed and seed stage? Like, okay, I've certified that you're a Delaware C Corp. Check that box. I have maybe done a background check. I have maybe reviewed your customer contracts. right? And maybe we've had a couple of conversations over cocktails or a dinner. At some point, we'll invite you into the hallowed, boardroom on a road in Menlo Park, and we'll ask you a bunch of really tough questions. But like transactionally, I mean, that's due diligence is transactions. How do we transactionally uncover whether you are a learn-it-all or a know-it-all when I know you're going to be on your best behavior at this stage, right? And so it's very easy for us to say you got to be a learn-it-all. It's a non-obvious answer to how do you discern that. And what we know for certain for us is we want to be in the trenches helping and building a relationship for 16 weeks as a form of understanding that. So again, are you a learn-it-all? What's the other thing that spending 16 weeks in the trenches with the founder does? It helps us see how they behave in different situations and how they treat other people. Right? That's really important. Well, because I think at the end of the day, and I'm overly simplifying it, and it's a good tweet, but at the end of the day, like being raised by, paying attention in kindergarten and being raised right by your mama, like these are the traits that we think make you a great founder. Like if you think that you're going to do this nearly impossible thing that most everybody can't do, because that's what you're going to need to do to get to that place that you think you're going to get to. You're not going to do it alone. You're going to have to be able to attract and retain. And by the way, you can't, and you guys know this better than anybody, you can't attract and retain B- players. You got to attract and retain and help incentivize people and be conducive for them to grow to their greatest potential. You've got to have A+ players. Because if you're going to sit here and tell me that you're going to do the nearly impossible that almost nobody can do, I'm going to create something from nothing and make it really big, then you're also saying that you're going to have to attract and retain A+ players. And again, what you guys know very well is A+ players have a lot of choices. They're A+ players. Why the heck are they going to go work for you? Right. So one of the things that we're trying to discern as well is just the basic human behavior. It's more of Kahneman Tversky than it is like venture due diligence. Like, what are the behaviors of the humans? How do they interact? And is that conducive for someone who has a lot of choices to want to choose them? Right. And so, one of our kind of silly philosophies is like, life is about constantly sending out invitations for people to be the people that we hope and want and need them to be in order to invite them to be a part of our life. And those people have an opportunity at every instance to RSVP because everything communicates. And so by creating this situation where people are invited to be the founders and the team that we need them to be fundable, well, they can RSVP through their actions. It's not telling me and answering me my tough questions during that dinner, during that due diligence meeting in the boardroom. It's nothing I can discern in the documents in your data room. I need to have that human interaction because everything communicates, and savvy investors pay attention to the between the lines. And so I think those set of behaviors are really, really important. I think being intentional, to DJ's question before, like writing stuff down. Like it sounds simple, but how often do we identify the thing we should do, but then we layer it on top of what we're doing and the pictures and the words don't match? Right? Something as simple as, when is the last time we sat down before the sales call and wrote down or typed out what should happen over the next 30 minutes for this to be a valuable use of my most valuable real estate, the 30 minutes on my calendar? What do I need to get out of this in order for it to have been a good use of my most valuable resource? Organizing the thoughts and being understanding of who I'm going to be talking to, being completely respectful of the value of my time and the value of that person's time. So you can open up the call and say, listen, this is what I'm hoping to get out of today. Do you think this is a good use of the half an hour? And is there anything you'd like to add to it? But again, how many times do we do that? Or how about afterwards? We come out of that great sales meeting, we all have happy ears, and we go to lunch. But nobody sits down and writes down what did they think they heard, and what was specific and measurable and objective and not just happy ears, and what are the next steps. And by the way, comparing those, because Harry, like, you heard one thing, but DJ heard another. Let's talk about that. Let's not just keep it in our head. Let's put it in a document. Let's organize it so we can look at it and say, okay, this is really interesting. And by the way, let's compare it to the last 3 conversations we had. Let's see the patterns we have emerged. Let's compare that to the hypothesis we had going into the conversation, such that the next conversation we have can be a little more thoughtful and intentional based on the learned experience we just had. These are things that don't often happen. And again, I don't expect founders to use this language that we use. But the question is, are there instincts to be intentional or casual? And again, part of the narrative that's floated out of Silicon Valley and infected places like Louisville and Cleveland and Nashville is a casual, performant, art-based form of company building. Right? What does dancing on a stage for 2 minutes with strobe lights and a booming bass have anything to do with building a great company of enduring value? But that is the demo day, and it literally takes place in a theater. Being a startup founder has become a performative art. But you know what a startup founder is also known as? A small business owner.
Amen.
Let's give away all that bullshit. And let's just treat this as a business from the bottom up. And so that intentional behavior, and then that's another thing we look for. Are they drawn to the romance? Why are you raising venture? I'll ask a founder. I mean, if you do not know what my money expects of me and therefore what I expect of you, how do you know you want my money?
Right. Yeah.
So, and the last thing I'll say is there's talk about everything communicates. There's one thing for certain that investors know, and that is if a founder is willing to waste their time, they're definitely willing to waste our money.
Yeah.
And so are you taking it seriously? Again, that notion that everything communicates, right? So I'm going to, when we meet, right, I am going to absolutely assume that you guys are great founders, that you guys have these traits, and that you guys are great investable founders. Okay, now, what do I know? What do I believe that means? Everything communicates. How does a great founder behave? Now, if my partners and I haven't thought about what that means to me and how to answer that question ahead of time, then how do we know that we're seeing it? And then it's a matter of saying, is this person behaving in a way that's consistent with who I want them and need them to be in order for this to be a good use of my time and for them to get more of it and maybe ultimately investment? And so like that set of behaviors, that seriousness, are we drawn to the nonsense? Are we subjected to the FOMO? Are we kind of quoting blog posts and things that we heard at a conference? Or are we just no nonsense talking practically about the challenges and the things that need to get done and what we think we need to do and how we think we need to do it in order to achieve this goal that we have in front of us?
Yeah. No, that's, you know what? I mean, like it's I got so many notes here. It's like, it's a master class of building a business. And I see the value that you bring. And I see why Harry was so excited after he had dinner with you. He didn't stop talking about you the whole next day. That's right. So, but who's influencing you? Like, who have you been majorly influenced by, both in the past and currently?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, like obviously, the people that are most closest to me, my partner Max and I, we influence each other all the time, and not by, Andrew, you should do it this way, but by leading by example. Max is extraordinary that way, and I learn so much from him every single day in terms of how to deal with certain situations, what things to prioritize, what things to think about, how to go after them, to the particulars of how we actually help our founders with B2B sales. And obviously, so too, the people in my life, I learned enormous amounts from my mother. My mother was a librarian and an English teacher. Now I'm sorry to say that it took her passing very tragically and unexpectedly many years ago for me to get my head out of my ass and actually recognize the lessons that she did teach me. But I decided at that point that greatest way that I could honor her would not be to cry about her death, but to behave in a way that she would expect of me, and to allow the things that she taught me to live on through me, and therefore, for her to, to continue having an impact beyond her death. And so that's clearly something too. I'm also, by the way, a voracious reader. And so it would be misleading to suggest that a big part of what influences me on a day-to-day basis now is the learning that I self-consume. I'm a voracious reader, and I'm a voracious viewer of everything that Lex Friedman puts out on his podcast. Everything from the fall and rise of the Roman Emperor to South American Meza Inca to artificial intelligence to neuroscientists to Middle East politics to you name it. I happen to think Lex Friedman is one of the best journalists alive right now. Nobody's perfect, but I happen to think he's fantastic. And the range of subject matters and the way he goes about presenting and bringing the information out of his extraordinary guests, I learn a ton from, both subject matter, management, and all things in between. I'm a voracious reader of historical fiction. And so I have learned a tremendous amount through wonderful, compelling, interesting characters that are placed into historically fictitious settings. And I read about a book a week, and it's 95% of the time it's historical fiction. So those are sources of influence for me.
That's good. That's awesome, and I love that you brought up moms like Miss Tammy, Harry's mom, Grandma Eitzen, my mom, two of our biggest fans here for the podcast. Actually, one of the reasons why we brought it back, they kept asking, when's the podcast starting? So, and the things you're so right though. It's home training doesn't get enough credit, and just the way you treat. It was often when I was leading teams in pharmaceuticals. You do lunches, you go to coffee shops. And I would always just watch, how do they treat the waitress or the waiter? How do they interact with the barista? How am I treating people around me? Am I leading by example in a way that, I would want want to see them and see myself. So all taught by moms though. And so I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. Sure. And I guess the other thing I would add to my list is, and this is very specific to the global experience that I was blessed to have. Man, more Americans need to spend more time outside of this country, and in particular Americans, because by the way, just about everybody else does go outside of their country, and oftentimes it's because they need to. Americans, we're blessed to live in an abundant place where we really don't technically need to, but yet we need to. And so my time living over in Asia for many, many years, and in that role, having a remit that included so many different wonderful cultures. I mean, I used to only half jokingly tell the management back at Thomson Reuters that it's not the United States of Asia. Stop treating it that way.
Yeah.
You really, one of the things that's very important to me, and I'm not exactly sure why, is bearing witness. I think it's really important to bear witness. And so the lessons I learned, and some the hard way, just being, the ignorant American, about how to understand different cultures and how to be more sensitive to it. And by the way, how to manage different cultures. I mean, I had teams where I was simultaneously managing Japanese, Chinese, and Emiratis. I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Boy, if that doesn't stretch you to your limits, that was hard work for an American, certainly this American. And so that is also something that I have tried very hard to carry forward into everything I do today, those lessons I learned.
I love it, man. Yeah. As we close, one of the things that I wanted to tap into, because I also remember this from sitting next to you at dinner this summer, you were talking very passionately about endurance running, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a number of ways, right? Like how you're leveraging it for your mental fitness, right? Like what you're experiencing during a long run. And DJ, I'm not talking about like a 5K, like the I run. I'm talking about some real running. So tell us a little bit about like that passion, like kind of what's next on the trail, if you will, and then also, but like really importantly, like how do you leverage that from your resilience and mental fitness?
Yeah, well, I mean, my goal this year was 52 half marathons and a 50 miler, and so a week from tomorrow, I'll do my first ultra marathon in Cincinnati, Ohio, along the Little Miami, and then doing a half marathon every Saturday, every weekend of the entire year. I'm a late in life long distance runner too. I discovered it about 18 and a half years ago, when I was 60 pounds heavier than I am today, living in New York City, living an extremely unhealthy lifestyle, and therefore being an unhealthy person. The New York Marathon ran past our apartment, and I decided that the following year I was going to run it, having never run a mile. And so I lost 60 pounds and ran the New York City Marathon. And it was during the training of that. And by the way, I posted 3:46, which is not bad for a Cro-Magnon.
That's damn good. That's damn good. Yeah.
I know where y'all come from. I don't have any athleticism. I even to this day, I run like a Cro-Magnon. And so, but what I learned about it, and it really was true, that the New York City Marathon was one of my favorite days alive, but it was really what I learned about myself in the journey of training and how I went about organizing my training and method. I mean, it's no coincidence that ultra marathoners are typically type A personalities, highly methodical, anal retentive, organized, detail oriented. I'm all of those things. So I learned late in life that I am my happiest when I'm running. There's neuroscientifically definitely evidence about that linear run and how that helps you process. For me, running is mental. It is how I meditate. And so anything that you enjoy and anything where you find that flow state, why wouldn't you want to do more of it? And so my interest in running this 50 miler next week, and why I can't wait for it, is like 50 miles, 10 hours of flow state. Hell yes. I can't wait. And I know, especially from what I've learned from talking to other ultramarathoners, miles 30 to 50 are going to be hard. Yeah. But again, how you choose to deal with that hard, what you choose to do with it and how you choose. And this is a big part of my philosophy. My daughters are tired of hearing it from me, but we have control over our own selves. We have to first admit that and understand it. We have control, and therefore it is our choice. If you do not like being angry in that situation, then choose not to and learn not to. You can't snap your fingers, but you have to have agency, and you have to take back that control that you can make that change. And running has just helped me do that. I just, during the week, I think we may even talked about this at dinner. Nowadays, during the week, when I have a particular little type of problem, I will immediately stop thinking about it and I will outsource it to Saturday morning, because I know that's one of the things that I will deal with more effectively during a run.
Wow.
Every Saturday morning when I start my run, I have between 1 and 3 things that I'm going to think about and resolve.
I love that, man. I love that. I love that. I love using that as like as an incubator. You know what I mean? Like that's a really good place.
And everybody has their own yogi. You guys know this better than I. Like, people think running is horrible. Okay, what's your yogi? So my idea of sitting still in a room with my legs crossed sounds like complete hell. Right? So like everybody has
Harry's seen me do yoga before, man. That was a treat.
Yeah, that was a treat, all right.
Exactly. So I very much am in line with what you hear from a lot of long distance runners.
Yeah, I love it, man.
That's really cool.
Meditative state. Cool.
How old
I love
are
it, man.
girls?
So I have a 19-year-old daughter who's in her second year of college, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who's in her second year of high school.
That's awesome. Very, very
That's
cool.
great.
Yeah, those are
Girl
my two little
dad.
startups.
That's
Yeah, man.
awesome,
Well,
man.
another girl dad, man. Another girl dad.
Yeah,
Maybe this
listen,
podcast might end
yes.
up being just like a girl dad podcast because
Yeah.
it seems like everybody we interview,
This
all
is
the
what we
men
do,
we interview
man.
are girl
And
dads,
by the
so-
way, like, what has made you guys better men? Probably your daughters. I know my
Yeah.
daughters have
No
made me
question.
a better man.
For sure.
No
They
question.
certainly made me push, take risks and like take some leaps and which I think has certainly made me better. And you
And learn
mentioned,
to shut my mouth.
yes, well, you don't have a chance. You don't have a chance to open up, right?
No,
Yeah,
because
so-
when you do open it, you're like the dumbest person ever, too. By the way,
Oh, yeah.
with this, that's
Oh my goodness, that's why I love this kind of podcast. Is just, I actually do have some value I can add.
a
Yeah,
ton.
let it out, Andrew. Let it out.
I don't
Let
have
it
any.
out.
Yeah.
Let it out.
We'll tag your daughters on social to let them know. Dad's
Your
kicking
dad
out.
has value.
Yeah. Well, listen, Andrew, this has been a blast. I mean, obviously we could probably go on for hours and maybe we'll have to have you back. I mean, I think that
Yes.
there's so many like nuggets there. You know what I mean? The thing that I'm thinking about is, of all the things, I mean, the thing that seems to stick in my head is this learn it all piece, right? Versus know it all. Whether you're a founder, whether you're an entrepreneur, just a general entrepreneur, whether you're just running another types of small business, whether you're a seasoned vet and at, some massive 400, Fortune, 500 company, whatever it might be, the ability to be a learn it all is really critical. Right. And,
for sure.
yeah.
And balance that with the humility to know that one, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want.
Mhm.
So I'm an experienced person, but also to know that, your goal every day is to just be less wrong.
Yeah.
And if you kind of start out processing with that perspective, as you say, whether you're a founder, a dad, a brother, a CEO, whatever the case is, it's valuable. If I can, the one thing I'd love to end with, because you raised it in the notes of things that we were going to cover, and I know I'm very long-winded, so we didn't get to a third of
You're
what we
good.
wanted to cover, and that's my fault.
No, you're good.
The one thing I'd love, just any chance I'm blessed with a microphone and an audience, I would like to share a practice that I start every day with that has been incredibly helpful to me. And whether it's this specific practice or something like it, I would encourage everybody, in terms of most especially gratitude, and to kind of to center yourself around gratitude. I try to start every single morning, and it only takes about 30 seconds. Just reminding, and it's about reminding, because we all know this, but we forget about it. I'm reminding myself that no matter where I go, if I turn on a spigot, it's going to fill the glass with clean, drinkable water. And that within a short walking distance of my home, I have an abundance of organic fruits and vegetables, and that I can walk into my closet and pick from a number of clean, soft pieces of cotton to protect my body with. And just starting out my day reminding that my worst case scenario includes healthy water and soft clothing to protect myself from the elements, and clean, fresh, organic fruit and vegetables. It's not that long ago that we were all living in caves.
Yeah.
And so reminding ourselves that this is where happiness starts with, this is the base of happiness, that if you can't derive comfort and happiness and gratefulness from those basic necessities that we as humans need, then no matter what you pursue throughout your day, you're not going to find happiness. So I think for those of us listening to the podcast, and for many of us who are blessed, especially in America, to be able to start our day that way, you should be happy from the minute you get out of bed in the morning, because you have those things. Everything else is icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. I love that, man. That's a great mic drop right there.
I was about to say, man, my mic already dropped. This
Just
both.
bloop. Mic drop. Yeah. Mic drop.
Hey, that's Cleveland right there, Harry. Representing Ohio. My man.
Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. That's where it's at. I love it, man. I love it. Andrew, you're the best, man.
Yeah,
We're just know this, that we're on that constant quest for knowledge as founders, as a company. We will be spending time with you
No
in
question.
GrowthX.
Good.
Should
Good.
you allow us
Hey,
to? Should you allow us to? And
absolutely.
so we're gonna. I know where I know in general where you live, and so I'll come find you
Yeah,
if
we'll
if
find him.
not, right?
Yeah,
But
we'll find him, man. That's a Google
yeah.
search right there.
Yeah,
We'll get Andrew, and we'll
easy.
find his relatives up here in Cleveland, and we'll get them all.
That's right.
I would love
No,
it, man. I can't wait to
yeah.
spend time talking about what
Yeah.
you guys are doing, the amazing things
Yeah.
you're doing. And again, like, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be
Yeah.
helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Really
man. We appreciate you. And like we like to say to our audience, please visit us on the next episode. And remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.